Welcome to Reframe Your Mindset for Success. With me today is Bob. How are you doing, Bob?
Paul, I'm doing great. I've been looking forward to our time.
Great stuff. Good to hear. And what have you been up to this week?
Well, it's only Tuesday, but I've had a couple speaking engagements already. So I'm having fun.
Great stuff. Good to hear. I'm obviously a busy week already. So, as you know, Bob, is the podcast called Reframe Your Mindset for Success. But where I always start is a start with your story. So, if you want to give us a little bit of insight to your story, in as many words as you want.
Well, thank you, Paul. I could say I was born at an early age, but I'll start just a little bit later than that. Um, my wife and I have been on the staff of CRU, CRU, for 52 years. CRU is a
Wow.
non-denominational ministry. And we've done lots of things. We spent 8 years in Crew campus ministry.
Yeah.
We moved to the Dallas, Texas area in 1979, and for the next 24 years, I directed the Josh McDowell Ministry, which is a division of Crew.
Yeah.
And Josh McDowell, a very popular speaker who's spoken to more college students, university students, and live audiences in some 80 countries than anyone in history. And incredible time. While I was with Josh, the doors to Russia opened,
Yeah.
led 18 major trips to Russia. But we stepped
Wow.
away from that role in 2003. We took a sabbatical. When we came back, Crew brought us 7 opportunities, and the one that resonated with us was leadership development. And
Yeah.
so I've been on the U.S. leadership development team since 2004. And the mission is simple: developing the next generation of leaders for Crew.
Yeah.
But the elevator speech, Paul, I always say that this is actually true of every organization, every company. And that is, in 15 to 20 years, the leaders who are now leading will probably not be leading anymore. In their place will be the leaders that are now being developed.
Yeah.
But if an organization, a company, isn't developing that next generation of leaders, well, they won't fail today or tomorrow or next week or next month or even next year, but they may fail 15 to 20 years from now. And history is filled with, stories, sad stories of companies that were once at the top of their game and 15, 20 years later may not even exist or are a shell of themselves. And when you dig around, the reasons are always complex, but almost always one of the reasons is there was no intentional development of that next generation.
Yeah.
And it was like the current leaders thought they would live forever. So that's a responsibility we take very seriously. But Paul, another part of my story
Yeah.
is, well, it's a confession. For most of my career, I was a benevolent dictator.
Right. Okay.
Now, I share that because my only paradigm of what a leader needed to do was I thought the job of a leader was to tell staff what to do, to give direction. I did say benevolent dictator. Paul, I grew up in a home where I was taught to say please and thank you.
Yeah.
So if you'd have been on my team, Paul, I don't think I ever would have said, Paul, go do this. Instead of going, hey, Paul, this week, here's what we're working on. It'd really be great if you could please do this. It
Yeah.
still had to do this, but wrapped in, kindness. And when you did it, Paul, I would have said, thank you, Paul, or at a staff meeting, Paul, you stand up. Staff, you need to hear what Paul's done.
Yeah.
And I don't want to suggest that we got nothing done, but I am saying I had one paradigm. I thought the job of a leader was to tell staff what to do. Now, Paul, for me, that changed in 2006.
Yeah.
Excuse me. I was already on the U.S. Leadership Development Team. But
Right.
in 2006, I found a book. Now, Paul, I love books. I say to people, I eat books for breakfast. And my wife loves to go to bookstores. She goes all over the bookstore. She knows when she's done, she'll still find me in the leadership section. And my normal practice is to, find 2, 3 books that look interesting that I've never seen before, pull them off, find a chair, sit down, peruse them to see if I'm going to buy one or more. Well, in 2006, I found the first edition of the book titled Leading with Questions by Dr. Michael McCourt. Dr. McCourt, professor at George Washington University.
Yeah.
And just looking a few pages, I said, okay, this one's going home. Now, Paul, I had no idea when I bought that book, I have it in my hand right now, that it would change my leadership forever, that it would actually give me a new direction. And I began to teach out of this book because I was on the leadership development team.
Yeah.
And Dr. McCourt's book is filled with stories of leaders literally from around the globe, not just the US, but literally from around the globe. And it shares not only leaders who are leading with questions, but the questions they were using. And as I read it, Paul, I had only one question. Why hasn't anyone ever shared this with me before? And I immediately embraced it. I immediately saw how much more effective it was. And Paul, I mean, when I speak, a question I ask leaders is, how many here, talking to leaders, how many of you love to be told what to do? No one ever raises their hand. None of us like to be told what to do.
That's right. Yeah.
And then I say, isn't it ironic? None of you like to be told what to do. Why then would you think your staff want to be told what to do? And
Exactly. Yeah.
and so, as we say, the nickel drops. It's like, yeah, why would I think that? And Paul, we can talk more, but another part of my story is I was teaching out of this book.
Yeah.
And great response. Well, in 2012, again, I found this book in 2006. In 2012, one of my colleagues had started a blog, and I ran into her at our headquarters, and I said, Andrea, you've started a blog. And she said, Bob, you need to start a blog. And I said, Andrea, why would I want to start a blog? And she said, well, let's sit. And we sat down, and she said, Bob, I think a mistake, and she knew I was 60 some at the time. She said, I think a mistake that a 60-some-year-old leader can make is thinking that our target audience, emerging leaders that we were developing, whose average age was probably 28, they'd been on our staff, 6 to 10 years.
Yeah.
But she said a mistake we can make is to think they speak English, I speak English, we're good. And she said, of course, that is helpful. If they spoke like Hungarian, we'd have to learn a whole new language. But Bob, they also do speak another language. And I said, really? What language? She said, the language of social media.
Yeah.
And she said, Bob, when they encounter, that 28 encounters a 60-some and politely asks, hey, Bob, are you on Twitter? Are you on LinkedIn? Are you on Instagram? And that, 60-some leader says, no, I'm never going to do that. She said, well,
Yeah.
are polite. They might not say anything, but she said, I fear they're walking away thinking, I hear old Bob did some good things in his day, but it's like that's long ago. He doesn't have anything relevant. Well, for whatever reason, Paul, that made sense to me. And the first question I asked was, what would I blog on?
Yeah.
Well, Andrea, Bob, I have no clue. You'll have to figure that out. And then I thought to myself, I don't want to do just another leadership blog. There's so many good ones. And I'd be a small fish in this big ocean. And then I had this question, Paul, is there a niche of leadership? And as soon as I had that question, it was like, well, of course, it'd be something with leading with questions. And so go to WordPress, which is a website to help bloggers, set up a blog.
Yeah.
First question they ask is, what do you want your blog to be called? Let's do a search to see if that website, URL is available. And I typed in leading with questions, smiling as I did, thinking surely the author, Dr. Michael McCourt, who I did not know personally,
Yeah.
or the publisher, would have tied it up. But no, it was available, Paul. It was available at, the was in American dollars, $29 a year. I didn't even have to think about it. I grabbed it.
Yeah.
And so the blog now is 11 years old. In April,
Wow.
it'll be 12, followed by leaders in some 190 countries.
Yeah.
And another part of the story, Paul, is I decided to post on Mondays and Thursdays twice a week.
Yeah.
And so I started 8 weeks later, 16 posts into this experience. I had a crisis. I was out of content. I shared everything from the 8 session seminar that I'd put together, and I had no more. Um, I sat right where I'm sitting now, and I said one of those, quickie prayers we all say from time to time, Lord, what do I do now? And the thought came to me that when I started blogging, I did maybe 30 minutes of Google research to see was anyone else blogging in this niche of leading with questions, and I couldn't find anyone.
Yeah.
But I did find individual posts on broader leadership blogs where the individual posts related to this theme. So that day, I did more Google research and I identified 5 posts that I thought were really good. I figured out the email address of the blogger and I sent off 5 emails. Now, I didn't know if this would work, Paul, but I sent off 5 emails asking, sharing that I'd found their blog post. I loved it. And I was writing to ask if I might have their permission to repost their post as a guest post on my blog. I
Yeah.
assured them with full attribution to them. I promised I'd do nothing without their permission and hit send. Paul, I didn't know if that would work.
Yeah.
Within 24 hours, I had 5 yeses. Every one of them said yes.
Great stuff.
And today, my blog, I'm much more a curator than an originator. But my subscribers are the beneficiary because if they were only learning from Bob, it would be minuscule.
Yeah.
But they, as well as me, are learning from leaders throughout the globe. And to date, there's been more than 500 guest post authors. And we've also had permission to excerpt from over 100 books.
Wow.
And so, Paul, perhaps I've shared too long here, but all of that relates to my story, Paul.
Brilliant. That's excellent. And you've obviously published a number of books yourself as well.
Yes. Paul, I have a group that helps me with my blog. I actually say they do everything behind the curtain. And I'm not highly technical. They are.
Yeah.
But they shared many years ago, hey, Bob, one way that you can grow blog subscribership is to offer a free ebook. And so my first book, a free ebook, is Great Leaders Ask Questions, a Fortune 100 list.
Yeah.
And I simply had gone through all the blog posts to date and pulled out what I thought were 100 of the greatest questions that had been posted. And then I wrapped each of those questions in brief stories to give them context of how they were discovered or how they're used. And the people who helped me were so right. Instantly, subscribership went up. And again, Paul, you're the expert in the UK. I don't know if this is true there, but in the USA, when somebody has written a book, and it doesn't have to be a published book, it can be a self-published book.
Yeah.
But when somebody's written a book, everyone else says, wow, Paul must be smart. Paul's written a book.
Yeah.
And opportunities for me to speak multiplied. And I smiled to myself because, Paul, I was no smarter having written a book than I was before it came out.
Yeah.
But the perception was, Bob must know something. He's written a book. And so fast forward, wrote 5 books. They're all free ebooks on my blog. If folks go to leadingwithquestions.com, on the top is the word books,
Yeah.
and click on that, and you'll have instant access to all five. And they're also available now in multiple languages, Spanish, Portuguese, French, um, Chinese, Albanian,
Wow.
Urdu, Farsi. I don't know if I'm remembering them all, but they're all available for free. So, many times there are people who are fluent in English, but their home language or their first language was something else. And many of them can access that. But then, Paul, there is another story.
Yeah.
Um, as I shared, it was Dr. Michael McCourt's book, Leading with Questions, that started me on this journey. Well, when I started the blog, I waited a while and then I sent him an email thanking him for the impact his book had had on my leadership, shared with him that I'd started this blog, and asked if I might have permission to excerpt from his book. Again, full attribution to him, but we'd include a link to Amazon or wherever he would like for people to
Yeah.
purchase the book. And I hit send and I wondered how he would respond. Well, within 24 hours, I had the most gracious email. Bob, you've made my day. Yes, Bob, you have full permission. Excerpt as much from my book as you want. Thanks so much for, giving it publicity and the link to Amazon. And fast forward, several years later, he was doing the second edition. And he reached out and said, Bob, I love your blog. Two things. Would you be willing to write an endorsement for the second edition? And could I list leadingwithquestions.com as a recommended resource? And it was like, well, of course. About a year after that, after the second edition came out, we were taking a group to DC, one of our staff leadership groups to Washington, DC. And knowing that's where he taught, I reached out ahead of time to say, Dr. McCourt, might you be in town? And gave him the date. And if yes, would you be willing to come speak to our group at dinner? And if that all work, I will buy second edition books for all of them. And if you could come an hour early to sign them, that would be terrific. Well, Paul, all of that worked, and he came an hour early.
Yeah.
And I must confess, I did that a little bit selfishly because I knew it would give me an hour one-on-one with Dr. McCourt as I would open books and, to make it easy for him to sign them. And quickly, as I'm calling him Dr. McCourt, and very quickly he said, Bob, just call me Mike. And that night, Bob and Mike became friends.
Brilliant.
And continued to engage. And then about 2 years ago, Mike calls me. He says, Bob, it's time for a third edition. And he said, I'm calling to ask if you'd be willing to be the co-author.
Oh,
And
fantastic.
I said, Mike, you have a PhD. You teach at George Washington University. Yes, I have a university degree, but that's all. Why would you want me to be the co-author? He said, well, Bob, a new edition requires about 30% new content. He said, you've already done all the research. Your blog at that time, 10 years, with 1,000 guest posts, you actually have done all the research. And so, Bob, I want you to be the co-author. Well, I graciously accepted. Summer of 2022, we worked together for about 6 weeks. He is brilliant.
Yeah.
I think he did the heavy lifting. He knew what from the second edition he wanted to delete. There's 10 chapters in the third edition of Leading with Questions, and each chapter has a theme, and I would feed him 10 times as much content as he would need so that he could pick and choose what he might want to use.
Yeah.
And end result is this past April, the third edition of Leading with Questions came out. It's my first published book, published by Wiley. And of course, through the wonderful relationship and kindness of Dr. McCourt, And when it came out in April, for a number of weeks, Paul, we're so thrilled by this. It was the #1 bestseller on Amazon in the
Wow.
category of business communication.
Yeah.
And then since then, Wiley, our publisher, continues to share with us that it's now in the top 10% of all business books sold.
Oh, fantastic.
So the third edition, the first 5 are all free ebooks at leadingwithquestions.com.
Yeah.
But the third edition of Leading with Questions is available at Amazon or wherever books are sold.
Brilliant. Well, that's a great story, and I'm really fascinated now that that's come all the way around. Congratulations on, an Amazon bestseller as well. That's fantastic. So, Bob, as you know, the podcast is really around, reframing your mindset and around mindset development. So, you've had quite an illustrious career, focused on leadership developments and obviously the power of questions. Well, if I was to ask you the question, why is mindset so important to you? What would you say?
Well, Paul, if I understand the concept in question, the thing that I think is so important is that, if in life and leadership, there's a bunch of decisions that you can make that you don't have to remake every day. And so they kind of become like, here's what I always do, or here's what I never do. And you don't have to rethink those every day. You can kind of operate on automatic pilot. In other words, already decided, this is what I always do. It just makes life simpler. It makes leadership simpler versus every day having to redecide everything. And so that's why I think having, you know, of course, take plenty of time, be very wise in your choices. But once you've decided on those core principles of what you want to always do and what you never want to do, you've just made life simpler for yourself.
Right, makes sense. Yeah. And so, just out of interest, Bob, how would you describe your mindset?
Well, earlier, Paul, I shared my confession that for most of my career, I was a benevolent dictator. My mindset was the job of a leader was to tell staff what to do.
Yeah.
Well, as a result of the story I've shared, finding that book, teaching out of it, today my mindset is rather than let me tell you, Paul, it's let me ask you. And the mindset is one of understanding that I will be a far more, or rather, I am a far more effective leader when I lead with questions, and for a variety of reasons. Um, you know, Paul, I'll ask you just to illustrate. Paul, whenever you've had someone you report to ask you, Paul, what do you think we ought to do here? Whatever the topic or issue was, how did that make you feel?
Yeah, they always make me feel good because, you're being involved, you feel valued because your opinion
Yeah,
matters.
exactly. Without that leader having said, Paul, I value you. Paul, I think you have something to contribute. Just the
Yeah,
fact that they
absolutely.
asked and then listened, communicated that. Um, and so, as I've understood that, I realize that when I ask others, and I'm curious, when I ask them, hey, what do you think about whatever the topic is? And 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 get their input, I'm always curious. So many times, the fact is, they've got a better thought on the solution than I do. And I would never have known that if I would have said, hey, Paul, here's what I want you to do. But when I say, Paul, what do you think we ought to do here? Or imagine your whole team around the table and you're asking the team, the probability, it's not a guarantee, but the probability is you're going to hear ideas better than you'd thought. But the second thing is even more significant. let's say we're working together and I said, Paul,
Yeah.
what do you think we ought to do here? And you share your idea. And I say, Paul, brilliant. Go for it. Execute on that idea. That is a great idea, a great solution. Uh, Run with that. Well, Paul, how hard are you going to work?
Well, the difference between working on your own idea and your own suggestion, that's going to motivate you
Yeah,
compared to being told what to do.
you're executing your idea. You know, it's kind of like your good name's on the line. It's like, I got to make this work. Whereas in the old Bob, where I would have said, Paul, here's what I want you to do. And you might have thought, I don't think that's a real good idea, but Bob's the leader. Bob signs my paycheck. I better do what Bob wants. But you're still thinking, but I don't think this is a really good idea. Well, when it doesn't work, you probably say, well, Bob, I didn't think your idea would work. And at any rate, so my mindset today is to, whatever the topic is,
Yeah.
to ask the team, what do you think? And listen and follow that also with what else? And listen again. And follow it again with, wow, this is so good. I'm taking notes. Please say more about this. Um, Paul, I've actually discovered that when you ask a question and you get that first answer, in the past, I would have just moved on. I asked Paul a question, I got an answer, that wraps that up. But
Yeah.
what I've discovered is that when we ask somebody for input, they most often roll out instinctively. It's not that they think this through. We all do a lot of things instinctively. They roll out kind of a safe answer to see how the person who asked them the question treats it.
Yeah.
And so if I ask you, Paul, hey, what do you think about? And you give me that first answer, and I say, well, Paul, that's dumb. Everyone knows that. Well, you're sorry you answered. But if I say, wow, Paul, this is good. What else? Well, you relax and you think, wow, Bob appreciates what I'm sharing, and you'll give me more. Again, you'll pause at some point, and rather than just move on, I'll say, wow, Paul, I'm taking notes now. Please continue. What else? And what I've discovered, Paul, is I actually get to your gold nugget, your very best thought,
Yeah.
kind of with the third or fourth question. And, when I'm speaking, I go through this and I share that we probably all heard the story. I think it's just a story, but they tell the story of this old gold miner who was looking for the gold vein. He mined all his life and he never found it. And
Yeah.
he finally quits. And somebody came along later and discovered the old miner was within 6 inches of the gold vein when he quit. Well, I share that if you only ask somebody, hey, what do you think about, get their first answer and then move on, you're a bit like that old gold miner. You got close, but you didn't get to their gold nugget. It's the
Right.
what else and tell me more about that and please continue.
Yeah.
It's those questions that actually get to their gold nugget. And then, of course, as we've already talked about, Paul, when you hear one of them share a great idea, to empower them to say, Paul, love it, run with that. So Paul is now climbing the mountain, but he's using, he's going up the mountain on the path that's most comfortable to him. And again, I think that's a lesson for a leader. I might climb the mountain one way, but I've got to give Paul freedom to climb the mountain his way. We're
Yeah.
both going to the same peak. In other words, the solution. But in the past, I know that the benevolent dictator would have said, Paul, here's what I want you to do, and then here are the steps I want you to take. And Paul, I thought I was being helpful by giving them the exact roadmap. I didn't know that that was actually counterproductive.
Yeah.
Um, it was not motivating. They felt micromanaged.
Yeah. It's amazing, isn't it? The power of, empowering people if you do it right, and then giving them
Yes.
autonomy to take action as well. Absolutely. So on the basis of that, it's really powerful stuff. On the basis of that, I guess, I'm listening to what you're saying about the questions that you ask, and to develop the mindset that you've got. Is that one way the tip would be is you think about your questions to have that mindset? Did you have a question bank, or are there just certain questions that work for you?
Paul, I didn't share this as part of my story, but I will now. I grew up on a farm. I'm a farm boy.
Okay.
And I say that just to say I'm not a complicated man. I like simple things.
Yeah.
And one of the things I love about leading with questions is so many of the best questions are so simple. They're not long, complicated, like who in the world could ever memorize that or take some kind of, PhD in order to lead with questions. And so my favorite question, Paul, is what do you think? Followed by, wow, that's good. What else?
Yeah. It's
Followed
that
by,
simple.
yeah, keep talking. Now, there's some other things, but I always share that if you've been a leader who only leads by telling, you can learn to lead with questions by just using those 4 questions. Meaning, in your next staff meeting, whatever the topic is, instead of saying to the staff, here's what I want you to do, in other words, telling them, instead say, hey, here's the topic. What do you all think we might do here? And then listen. And as you start getting responses, affirm them. Wow, this is good. What else? Wow, this is good thinking. Please say more about that. Just with those 4, you can move. And Paul, I have some other favorite questions I'd be happy to share that are also simple. But the concept is
Yeah.
the
I'm with you.
power is asking in that simple question and then listening
Yeah.
and letting them talk. And and again, I love that leading with questions, and so many of the best questions are so simple.
Makes complete sense. On the basis of your career, then, I'm if you were to look at, and I know leading with questions is had a massive impact on your leadership and your life, but who's actually helped you develop your mindset then?
Well, as I think about this, certainly and foremost, I have to name Dr. Michael Marquardt, my friend Mike.
Yeah.
Um, it was finding his book and devouring it and teaching out of it. We often say you learn the most when you're teaching. And so I think the fact that I not only read it, but began to teach out of it, and the response was so good that that helped me develop. Something I also frequently share about how all of us can grow on anything is watch one, do one, teach one. And I'll give you just an example. Let's say that I did not know how to change the tire on my car,
Yeah.
but Paul, you know how to change tires. So you say, Bob, come with me. And the first thing you do is you say, Bob, I'm going to change the tire and I want you to watch. But Bob, before I do this, as soon as I'm done, I'm going to have you change the tire and I'll watch you. And if I know that, wait a minute, as soon as he's done, I'm going to have to do it, I actually pay attention a lot more. And then you said, and Bob, after I've watched you, you don't know this, but I've invited my friend Joe. He doesn't know how to change tires either. He's going to come over after you've watched me do it. You've done it successfully. And when he comes over, you're going to teach Joe how to do it. But the same process, you're going to show him, you're going to ask him to do it. And you don't know this, but I got another friend named Sam. He's coming over and Joe's going to teach him. Well, I find that, looking back, I read the book and then I began to teach out of the book
Yeah.
and begin to help others learn to lead with questions. And so all of that helped me develop the mindset. And then also, Paul, as I shared about my blog, I'm much more a curator than an originator with over 500 guest posts and over 100 book authors giving me permission to excerpt from their books.
Yeah.
I know that I've learned from every one of those. And it's just been fun. So want to give credit to all the guest post authors and book authors, but foremost, Dr. Michael McQuart is the one who helped me.
Brilliant. Fantastic. So after such a brilliant career that you've had, I'm sure you've had some adventures or some stories. You've obviously been telling me quite a few stories already, but I always ask if there's a fun story that you can share.
Well, there is. I thought about that. I don't know that it relates to the leading with questions, but when I was directing Josh McDowell Ministry, we took numerous groups to Russia, and we would take, 300 to 400 Americans. Sometimes we had British friends go with us, which was
Yeah.
wonderful. But we would put 30 of our trip participants on a bus. We would hire 6 Russian interpreters. And so we'd have 36, but each group of 5 participants would have one interpreter.
Yeah.
And one day, and when you're leading a bus, I was the bus captain. And Sean McDowell, Josh McDowell, my colleague's son, was the co-captain. And I don't know if you've ever been on a tour bus where you have lots of stops. One of the
Yeah.
things that's always can be kind of frustrating is people that don't return to the bus on time. And so one of the things we said at the beginning is in a fun sort of way, but I had everybody on the bus raise their hand and I say, you're all going to take an oath. And here's the oath. If ever I'm not back at the bus when we've announced the time for departure, I wish for the bus to depart without me because as an adult, I've decided that I'll find my own way home or back to the hotel.
Yeah.
And they all said that. So one of our stops on the first or second day was we stopped at a Russian souvenir market where they, made all sorts of things, but many, many booths had, Matryoshka dolls, the nesting dolls. And, there was one booth where if you showed them a picture of your family or whatever picture you wanted of a group of people, they would actually paint a set of dolls that would have, the father, the mother, the son, the daughter, all in the
Yeah.
birth order kind of
Yeah.
thing. Well, there was 2 women that had heard on my bus that had heard about that booth, and they wanted to go there, and knowing that we would return a week later, and the people would have these hand-painted Matryoshka dolls ready. Well, it took longer than we thought, and when we got back to the bus had left. My co-captain, Sean McDowell, when it was time and I and these 2 women weren't there, he said to the bus, "What should we do?" We all took an oath. Bob led in the oath. What should we do? And they all said, "Let's go." So they went. They left
Brilliant.
the 3 of us. Now, fortunately, this was in Moscow, and I'd been there a number of times, and there was a metro station, a subway station, very near the souvenir market, and I knew the way back on the metro to the hotel, and so, there was no panic. I just led the 2 women to the metro, and we took the metro, and when I got to the hotel lobby, there was Sean McDowell laughing, and and I congratulated him. He wondered, I'm sure, if I would be upset, but I congratulated to him. And I said, Sean, no one on our bus will ever be late the rest of this week because they know if you left the bus captain, we'll leave them. I said, if I'd have thought of this, we'd have planned this on purpose. But anyhow,
Brilliant.
that's one funny story I remember, Paul.
That's a great story, Bob. Really is a great story. So coming full circle, concluding, what you've had to say and some of the stuff that you told us. If you were to give us one last piece of advice, I think I know what's coming, but what would it be?
Well, Paul, this quote hangs on the wall here in my office. It's not original by me. It was written by David Augsburger.
Yeah.
And the quote is, being heard is so close to being loved, they're almost indistinguishable. Again, I'll read it again. Being heard is so close to being loved that they're almost indistinguishable.
Oh, that's
You
lovely.
know, Paul, if we're
Yeah.
going to lead with questions, if we're going to ask questions, the next thing we need to do is listen.
Yeah.
Don't ask a question if you don't intend to listen. But when we are being heard, when a person is being heard, when they're being listened to, they may not identify it as, oh, my boss loves me. And perhaps in the workplace, it's not even appropriate to say to a coworker, I love you. It may not be. But when we listen, when they feel heard, they feel valued, they feel accepted. They may not identify it as love, but again, the quote is being heard is so close to being loved, they're almost indistinguishable. And this quote motivates me to listen to people, knowing that as I listen, that act of listening communicates to them that Bob values them.
Yeah.
So that's what came to mind when you said, what's the last piece of advice you'd like to share with the listeners? It's that one, Paul.
Brilliant. That's great advice, really is. Well, Bob, it's been brilliant having you on the podcast today. I've really enjoyed it. So many thanks for your time.
Oh, Paul, I wish we could do another one where I asked you questions. You've learned a lot about me today, but Paul, another time we need to connect, probably not for your podcast, but just for time one-on-one where
Yeah.
I could hear more of your story and learn from you.
Excellent. And anytime, Bob, anytime.